Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Ramos Law Difference Makers podcast. I, your host, Dr. Jim Hoven, am here today to share an incredible story with you from a really, really good friend of mine. Like every other week, we bring people on the podcast who are making a difference. And as you all are very well aware, if you've been following the show for any time at all, you know that we do a lot with education. We're really big about education. And today's guest, Mr. Chris Stirrup, is all about education. He's given his life to it. In fact, I've had the opportunity to speak in his class that we're going to talk about today a few years in a row here, and to see the impact and the difference that he's making in people's lives. It was a must-have guest for us today. So whether you're watching or whether you're listening, I want you to really listen closely to some of the things that we're going to talk about. And then I hope that you find some inspiration in this that you'll want to take in your own life, or that you'll want to share. So as you hear this, spread it to people. I think there's a message for you, and there's a message for so many others. So without further ado, I want to introduce Mr. Chris Stirrup. Chris, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. We've been talking about this for a while, and I'm so glad to have you here. And just so the people that are watching or listening know, you actually are the coordinator and facilitator of something that's so unique. It's a program that's known as the Epic Medical Careers Program, and it's pretty unique. Now, your focus is on mathematics. I want to call you the mathematics professor, right? But you're at Cherry Creek High School in Greenwood Village. And by the way, an incredible school. Like Cherry Creek is known for its excellence and how it really wants the best for its students, both academically and on the athletic endeavors that they're engaged in, all kinds of stuff. But you are doing this program, and I really, really want to start out by having you tell all of our audience a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I'm going to be entering my 26th year as a teacher, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I absolutely love what I do, and look for what's best for kids. A little bit about this medical class. It actually had started at a neighboring school district at Arapahoe High School in 1975 or 1976. And about 16 years ago, Dr. Pete Baker, who unfortunately passed away a few years back, I was in his office for an appointment and asked my doctor if he'd like to come in and speak to my honors kids about being a doctor. And he said, well, no, but my senior partner would like to talk to you. And it turned...
No, at that time, was your honors class a math class?
Yeah, it was an honors math class at the time. And so Pete Baker met with me, who was not my doctor. He was just one of the senior partners at this medical facility. And he said, I have a plan. I've been speaking in a class at Arapahoe High School since the mid-'70s. I want to start a class just like that. I'm getting ready to retire. I want to be a part of doing something. And this is actually when I was down in Douglas County at Chaparral High School. And so I met with my principal at the time, Ron Peterson, and I said, Ron, I have a doctor who wants to start a medical class. Now, here's the kicker, and you've been fortunate about this. We used to start the class at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
Yes. And it was so funny because people would say, well, who's going to show up at 6 o'clock in the morning? Well, the first year we offered it, we had about 60 kids. The second year, we went up to about 110 kids. And we continued to do it, and we built it for quite a few years at Chaparral. And then I was asked to join Cherry Creek Schools with the class. And we started at Cherry Creek at 6 in the morning for a couple of years. And of course, the district said, well, who's going to come to the class? We had 120 students, our largest class ever that year at Cherry Creek High School. And it was absolutely fantastic.
First year.
That was the first year.
Wow.
And we consistently have between 105 to 110 students every fall semester. And we offer the class Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Pete Baker was instrumental in getting the class up and going. He introduced me to a large amount of medical professionals throughout the entire area. They come in, they speak. When we first started the class, we just brought doctors in. And then we started changing it, saying there's so much to medicine. There's so much more than just being an MD or a DO. You could be a nurse. You could be a physician assistant. You could be a technician. You could be a paramedic, a fireman. And we just brought the whole gamut of people in. And this coming semester, I have 16 former students that took my class who are now doctors, nurses, or PAs that are going to come in and talk to our kids. And so when people say, does the class work? Yes. My goal for the class is if they can walk out and say, at the end of the semester and say, medicine is something I want to do, Or on the opposite end, and I think this is just as important, medicine is definitely something I don't want to do. And I just love that that question can be answered for a kid. When I was in high school, I wanted to be an orthodontist. The reason I wanted to be an orthodontist, I kid you not, my orthodontist had a cool car. That was my motivation to become an orthodontist. Now, I'm not an orthodontist, but that was just a dream that I had because my orthodontist had a cool car. We bring with this medical class the opportunity for kids to realize maybe I don't have to be a doctor to be in medicine. Maybe a physician assistant might be for me. Maybe a nurse might be for me. Maybe I could go with the route with the military. Maybe I could go with the route, working at inner city medicine. Maybe I could work out in the country. There's so many opportunities that the kids are brought to realize there's more to medicine than just their yearly physical if they're in athletics where they're, seeing their doctor and saying,
That's so beautiful. I want to dive deeper into the program because it has been such a great experience for me. And Dr. Ramos has spoken basically every year that I've spoken. And, I talk about natural health care, chiropractic, et cetera. He talks about medicine and emergency room and all that kind of stuff. I want to, because your passion, it just comes through. It's so much. Every conversation you and I have when we hang up the phone, I'm like, or when our meeting ends, I'm like, man, that guy's just connected to his passion, his purpose. I'm interested to know, prior to all of this, did you always know you were going to be in education? Obviously, you just talked about being an orthodontist. What was the turning point where education was the answer, and why high school versus college or versus junior high or elementary school?
Well, when I was in college, I entered Arizona State University for mechanical engineering. And I was also taking some courses at one of the community colleges at the same time, just to try and save some money because I was paying for my college as we were going through. And I had a physics professor at one of the community colleges that kept having me, help with his tutoring labs. And I'd go in and I would tutor kids in math and physics and chemistry. And there was one day he came to me and he goes, Chris, you're not an engineer. I'm like, oh, I got a couple years. So, no, you're not an engineer. You're a teacher. And it changed my entire outlook on what I wanted to do because I think I had the intelligence to become an engineer, but it wasn't my passion. It was like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And as soon as he said, you're going to be a teacher, it kind of just changed my whole perspective. I left the engineering program, went to Grand Canyon University to finish up my degree in math and degree in education. And I have never looked back once going, darn, I wish I would have been that mechanical engineer. Not that there's anything wrong with being an engineer. It's just, it wasn't for me. And what I love about education is every day is different. Every class period is different. I might have the most ideal lesson during, say, a first period class. And then the second period class, which might be the exact same content, it would be completely different because I would have thought of something mid-lesson going, I'm going to try this and let's see what happens. And it keeps you on your toes as a teacher. I don't have a set of lesson plans that I just open up saying, okay, now this is year 25, year 26. I'm going to do. Nothing's the same in my class. I love that I reintroduce concepts. I like to engage the kids. And I've seen so many kids. I've had people tell me, oh, I could never be a teacher because kids are so much different. I don't see difference in 26 years. I see people who want to know something. They want to figure out what's next for me in life. And I love that opportunity. I have, as I said, I have 16 students that are coming back to speak. So there is students that do reach back out to me saying, I remember this with your class. And it could be the medical class or it could be my math class. And it's just fantastic. Now what gets hard is I've looked back and I had some students when I first started teaching back in Las Vegas many years ago. I was at a performing arts magnet school in Las Vegas. So we didn't have any athletics, but we put on some of the most incredible plays and musicals and dances.
And you were teaching math.
I was teaching math. And at the time that I was at the school, a student that I knew, his name's Matthew Gray Gubler. You might know him from the show Criminal Minds. Well, he was at our school. There was another young man at our school. His name was Schaefer Smith. Now, people don't know who Schaefer Smith is, but if you watch the show, If You Think You Can Dance, the rapper and singer and songwriter Neo, that's Schaefer Smith.
No kidding.
So I've had these students that have been in my hallways of So I'm like, this is cool. Wow.
That's so amazing. You know, I want to ask you something, because you really sparked something in me as you were just sharing about how no lesson plans and how you're not no lesson was, but it's not, hey, cookie cutter from year 1 to year 12 to year 26. You teach math. And for most of us, me included, like math was one of my struggle subjects because my mind, and I was a little younger graduating, you know, I graduated at 17 and math wasn't my natural gift. I had to work really hard and get a lot of help in math, but math always seemed so black and white that there were a few ways to get to the answer, but it was either right or it wasn't there. And, you know, at the end of the day, 1 + 1 always equals 2, et cetera, et cetera. But what you just said was so interesting to me, that you might change the same content from 1 to 1 to help me learn a concept different. How do you bring creativity and variety into what a lot of us think of as A + B = C?
Well, let me share. There's a one semester math class that I teach called Business Calculus, and it has a calculus curriculum with it. But every Friday I have something called Real Life Applications of Math. And so I usually start out with like fair division. I show, you know, if you were the heirs to an estate and there's 5 of you, how would you divide that estate fairly? You know, someone's going to say, I want to have the house. Well, there's only one house. So how would the other 4 feel if one person got the house and the rest of you are like, well, so sorry, you get to split this. So I show them how to divide it up with fair division. I show them how tax tables work with just paying taxes. And I break it down into a simplistic form, because I point out to them, I said, we've heard that people are cheating taxes. Let's look at how the tax system actually works. Well, you have your first X amount of money that you're going to pay a percentage of. And then that next portion, you're going to pay a certain percent on that. And then, you know, as you move on up, so that creates. And I've even brought it back to them. So, you know, people have said, oh, this person should have paid 30% of their taxes. Well, because of how the tax table works, that last end was probably the 30% taxable income, but anything prior to it was at a lower rate. And so even if someone says, oh, they should have paid 30% in taxes, well, no, because the summation of what they made from 0 to 10,000, whatever the thing is, that I don't have it in mind exactly what the tax table is off the top of my head. But it's like, well, I can show that somebody who's making $60,000 a year did not pay in the 30% or whatever the taxable region would be. And it's not because they're cheating it. It's because it happens that way. Unfortunately, but fortunately, so often we're getting so many people who are going to social media and that they've heard it, they saw something, that's the truth. And there's a lot of times I like to debunk it a little bit, just saying, just please realize there's other sources. There's more to the story than what came across that 2.5-inch screen on your phone.
Wow.
And it kind of grabs their attention. And a lot of times it's like, you know, I'm 51 years old now. A lot of times like, what does this guy know? And so I have to reinvent myself every time. And I'm very honest with the kids that I will learn more from them than I will be able to teach them. And I love that whole thought of that I'm continuing to learn from kids. We have so many different opportunities for students to learn, but we also take ourselves in what society is these days. A school shooting, it's horrific. How am I preparing different, or how am I trying to say, okay, I'm going to teach you, say, the quadratic formula. But yet you have a kid who might be worried about, well, what if something were to happen? And that's a real thought. And it's scary for a kid. And I think it's scary for parents. My oldest daughter was in 8th grade when the Arapahoe High School shooting took place. And then she was the pianist for the choir at Arapahoe High School when she was there. And they had a lockdown drill, and the kids that were in the choir had been at that school when it had happened. And my daughter said you could feel the intense energy and the anxiety of, you know, are we doing right? And I hope to think we are. And I try to, something that Ron Peterson, my former principal, used to say, and I've stolen his terminology because it's so powerful word. It's such powerful words. His words, and I say this every day my class ends. Whatever class period, medical class, math class, doesn't matter. take care of one another. And I share that with kids all the time. And it reverberates back with kids.
Have you seen do you hear people giving feedback on the message that you say that over and over again?
It'll be about 30 or 40 times I'll say it. And then all of a sudden kids start connecting, going, I get that. Make eye contact with somebody in the hallway. Maybe you shouldn't be checking your social media. Maybe you should be looking at the person who's coming at you, because the eyes of somebody speak volumes. And there's a lot of times I pride myself when I'm walking down the hallways. I might not know the student who's coming at me, but I will make eye contact with them, read those eyes. And there's been a couple times where it's like, hey, I love the shoes you have on today. And that might be the smallest little thing that might just inspire that kid. Why do I ask about the shoes? It's a very safe thing to compliment somebody's shoes.
Yes.
Someone's not going to say, oh, why would you say that? So,
right. That's so cool.
Yeah.
What have you seen as far as differences in kids? You said kids are still kids over the last, going towards 30 years now. Have you seen, obviously technology has changed, and so they've changed with it's almost like kids are hardwired now to be savvy at technology. Have you seen anything in your experience in the school levels of how kids are one way or another? Now, keeping in mind, Cherry Creek is a school that's very well established. It's a high socioeconomic group. There's high functioning people there, and there's a lot of great stuff going on in the community around it. But still, you've been there so long that I think you've probably seen some sort of trend of how kids are with each other, with life. I don't know if pandemic has made pre and post kids in high school different. Just observation about kids.
The pandemic, that was new to all of us. Fortunately for me, and I was helping a lot of teachers at my school with it, I have recorded all of my lessons and I post them on YouTube, and it allows a student who's absent, they can go back and rewatch it, or if they need to review it. So when we went to say we need to be remote learning, I was already using the technology, not because I saw the pandemic coming. I just saw this tool is available and I can use it. And so I write on a tablet, and my tablet will be broadcast to 2 different screens in my classroom. And then the recordings of my lessons is my voice and me writing on the tablet. And so it's not the most interesting thing you're seeing, because you're watching some writing show up and a person's voice. But it's a neat opportunity for kids. I've had kids who have had to leave on family vacations or for whatever reason, and they'll say, what can I do when I'm gone? That I'm going to post my lessons on the Schoology, which is Schoology is a platform that Cherry Creek Schools uses. The kids find the link saying, okay, this was Monday, September 15th or whatever, that might be. They click on that for their class. They can watch the raw footage of what the class was. It's not as good as being in the classroom, but it's a nice tool for the kids. And what I absolutely love is I have seen kids prior to coming into class watching my video on their phone to review for the test that they're going to take.
So good.
I think back when I was in high school, and there was times that if I opened up my notes, I'd be like, what is this? I had the 3-dimensional boxes I was drawing, the doodle swirls, write down a handful of things, and I had no idea what I was looking at. No one really taught me how to take notes. And it was funny, and I think me as a teacher going, there's a lot of Chris Stirrups out there in the world who I found success through college and university. As you had said, you weren't good in math when you were in school. I wasn't either. And my mom was a math teacher.
Wow.
And she'd come in, hey, I show no, you don't know what you're doing. And I was just, Chris Stirrup as a, 15, 16, 17-year-old kid. But now I have the opportunity where kids, they have it. It's right there. And could you imagine if everything that you needed for a class, you could find on your phone?
What a deal. Yeah, that's incredible. What tools, and you come from, as we've talked about off air here, you come from really good stock when it comes to education. Like you're just talking about, your mom, educator, wife's a professor, right? Mm-hmm. At one of the local universities here. You're a teacher. this is ingrained in the DNA of the family of how you guys go. That's impressive. Like, do you think it's a love of learning, a love of teaching, both that has made it the roots so deep for you guys?
I need to tell you, my wife is a very well educated. She, there's times where my daughters and her would spell things back and forth, so I couldn't get caught up in the conversation.
So how kind of them.
So my wife has been instrumental for my daughters with education. I mean, there's been times they'd ask me for help with math and things like that, but for the most part, I wasn't right there as the Johnny on the spot tutor. My wife was there. Before she went back to working at the university, she was a stay-at-home mom. She would volunteer in the kids' classrooms, just doing those kinds of things, and really followed their education. And of my two daughters, my oldest will be a junior at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, and my youngest is going to be a freshman at Purdue. And she got into the honors college in Purdue. And I'm like, wow.
Impressive.
Wow. So I didn't see that coming. I knew both kids were smart, but I was like, holy cow, that's pretty cool. So
nice.
And they're, I know my youngest, this is her summer between her senior year of high school and college, but she's excited, and I think that's pretty cool. And I know that my daughter, who's going to be going back here in a few weeks to Nebraska for university, she loves learning. She's already talking about going to graduate school, and I'm like, that's really cool.
Very nice. That's so good. Now, with that kind of family history and background, I want to jump back into this EPIC program. It's so interesting. Like, I was honored when you first asked me years ago if I would come in and talk about what we do as chiropractors and natural healthcare providers, or what we call CAM, complementary and alternative medicine. And it was fascinating to me because I know in Cherry Creek District, there's a lot of doctors and lawyers and surgeons. There's a lot of that's around that area. And this classroom full of kids, 7 a.m. start. 6 a.m. blows my mind, but 7 a.m. I was impressed. They were all there, over 100 of them. And it was interesting to me that they were very considerate, and I'd asked how many had been to a chiropractor before, just to get a read of the room. And it wasn't a lot. There wasn't a lot that had experienced what we'll call natural health care, whether it be physical therapy, acupuncture, chiropractic, whatever. But they asked some great questions. They were engaged. And I felt like as long as I gave them the energy, the best of myself, they were reciprocating that with me, so that these kids coming in preschool, this was not their normal hours. This was hour 0 versus hour 1. They were really attentive. And so it made me more excited to come back the next year and the next year, and, et cetera, because of what I felt with them. Is that something that you, as the facilitator and kind of coordinator of this program, do you have anything to do with helping instill that curiosity and that attentiveness in them? Or are these the kids, because they're looking at medicine of some sort, they're naturally more motivated, do you think, or some combination?
I think it might be a combination. I mean, one, if you have a kid who's going to show up an hour before school, that's a pretty motivated kid. And there's times when I go through my very first class with my students, I'll tell them, these are some things I want you to be considerate about. You don't need to be checking your social media. This person who has come before you, whether it's Dr. Ramos, Dr. Hoven, any of my other doctors, nurses, PAs, you all are donating your time. And I really convey that message to the kids, saying, you don't have to take notes, but you need to listen, because when you're saying, I'm just going to check my social media, well, one, what are you seeing that early? Your friends are still in bed. So I just kind of look at it that way, and I remind the kids, and I do walk around the room quite a bit. And there's, while anyone's speaking, and I kind of do a little directive, going, I don't want you to do that. But what I have done is, all of the kids have my cell phone number, and I tell them, sometimes there's an embarrassing question that they don't want to necessarily ask in front of 100 people, and I tell them, please text me. I'm not going to throw you under the bus saying, hey, whoever's number is 720 blah blah blah. This is your question. So I have infectious disease doctors who come in. They talk about STIs and STDs. That's embarrassing for a kid to talk about diseases on certain parts of the male and female anatomy.
Yep.
But they'll throw the question at me. I have no problem asking the questions. We have labor and delivery, a nurse who comes in who's actually one of my former students, and the kids, they're curious. Like, that's really how that works. But they don't want to act like they think everyone else around them knows what they're, what's going on, and they're the only one so that's why I tell them, let me ask the embarrassing question. You're not going to embarrass me, by me, and I'm not going to call out a kid saying that's a silly question. Why would you ask that? Every question, there's curiosity there, and I think it's cool. And I think we had 8 or 9 kids who sent me texts about you, and then once I started reading texts, all of a sudden kids are like, okay, my question was asked, now I can ask a follow-up to that, and it's really cool to watch what these kids want to know. Part of the class, though, we do get to go to a cadaver lab, and the kids get engaged, seeing a human body from the inside out and everything about it. And it's fantastic to watch those kids. And the nice thing about the cadaver lab, that's where I really get to know what these kids' interests are. Because one, I'm not necessarily the person who's teaching that day. It might be yourself or anybody else on my medical staff that comes in and speaks. But when they're in the lab, I have 10 to 15 students, so I can get to know them. And it's like, hey, what kind of medicine would you like? What's your favorite presentation been so far? And I get to hear from those kids. Unfortunately, the past 2 years, we haven't gotten to do that because COVID had shut lots of stuff down. But we're back up for this coming semester, which I'm excited to have the kids go and have that type of learning as well. I've also had students who have gotten the opportunity to shadow different doctors and medical staff. I had the first year we offered the class, it was many years ago. I had 2 students who found he was a transplant surgeon on kidneys. And the doctor said, yeah, here's my cell number, call me. And I had 2 students that were in a kidney transplant operating room watching a kidney transplant, not in the rafters. They were pretty much in the fancy looking scrubs watching this. And I thought, how cool is that?
Amazing.
Yeah. And now, because of a lot of different rules and regulations, I always tell the kids, reach out to me. Once you are in college and you're back on break, reach out. My email at Cherry Creek Schools is going to be the same. Reach out to me. Say, hey, do you remember me? I took the medical class last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Now I'm at this particular school. Can I go see? And it's amazing. It's great to hear some of the pathways that our kids are going. And I've had, I think a couple kids actually went into and saw a court case with Dr. Ramos a couple years ago. He let them know, hey, this is what's taking place. So, and I think they actually went to it. And
I think so.
What a cool opportunity.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
What are you seeing with respect to, you made a really great distinction early in the show today, talking about the goal for you, one of the goals anyway, is to help people, these young folks know, is healthcare a path that they should take, or do they learn from all this experience? Man, healthcare is not for me, right? And either way is totally okay, just like engineering versus teaching, totally good. Do you have any idea of the number of all these years, all the times of people that have gone through these classes, how many have gone into healthcare? Any idea, percentage, total numbers, anything like that? Do you get a lot of feedback on it?
I do get some feedback. There's times where I'll come across a secondary thing where perhaps I'm out at a restaurant, and a lot of times former students recognize me. I guess I don't look different. There's times they come up.
We're not aging.
Yeah. And they'll come up, hey, you remember me? I'm, Johnny Smith. And I've never had a Johnny Smith, so I'm just going to use that as an example. And it's like, and then they make a couple keywords. Every now and then I'll find out. I would say of those kids, I would say about 15 to 20% definitely get on a pathway right away into medicine. And then some of them might try and do other things, such as like me saying, hey, I want to be an engineer. And then all of a sudden they change to something else. I do have quite a few students that I'll see them, former students who they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s. I'll see them on Facebook. And it's like, I didn't know you were a nurse. And, I'll reach out to them. I actually had a former student. I didn't realize she was out of state, but I knew she was so excited about passing her nursing exam and become a full-time nurse. And so I'd sent her a message through the Facebook Messenger. And I said, I'd love to have you come talk to her in the class. She goes, when would you like me to do it? And I said, well, how about this date? And she's like, that'd be awesome. I can't wait. She flew in from Boston.
Oh, wow.
I had no idea she was in Boston, but the class motivated her so much. She was like, it's great because I was able to see my parents because her parents still lived here in Colorado. She's married. They don't have any kids yet, but she flew in from Boston to speak.
Because you had that class had that big of impact. As you're organizing this, I know one of the things you do is you look for different types of providers so that you can offer a really wide experience for the students, that they can see everything from the highest level of surgeon to techs to everything in between. And they ask great questions. I know, at least in the times that I've been there, they've really wanted to know and talked about all kinds of good stuff. When you look at this, is there a specialty that you're seeing that right now, or maybe over time, that kids are curious more about than others as all these people come in? Or do you see kids going, man, I'd really like to learn more about this particular thing, orthopedic surgery, for example, or physical therapy, anything like that? Or is it still really widely varied based on personalities and experiences, et cetera?
I do have some that they will go on saying, I have to of a certain MD. And then they start investigating more and more with physician assistant and realize, wow, that I could be X amount of years, less time. I could be practicing medicine in 5, 6, 7 years versus, some of the MDs who come in, after high school, I spent an extra 16 years in school. Now, some of those might have been fellowships, so they might have been getting some sort of pay. But time kind of means something to kids. I think some of them kind of reach deep going, okay, do I want to start my career in practicing medicine at, say, 38 to 40, or do I want to start it at age 28 to 30?
Yes. And the values have changed. I was just listening to a podcast yesterday, and this author was talking about, he's really big on generations and how generations shape culture and culture shapes generations, and this kind of back and forth between it. And, now I think the newest generation is called the Homeland generation or something, and, whatever. And then we go back to millennials and on up the chain. It's interesting to me because while this isn't generally true on every kid, or specifically not true on every kid, in general, we see different trends. And so when you talk about, now we're seeing the physician assistant, I think some of that might tie to the fact that money's important, but it's not as important as time, as social connection, as some of these other things in maybe the generation that we're in right now. So they're saying, okay, I could make blank $1,000 more a year as an MD versus a PA versus a nurse practitioner. They're all very fine paying jobs.
Absolutely.
But the time to get through school and what I have to give up and the different nights and the shifts, if they really understand that, I think it does lead generationally to them saying, well, maybe this isn't the only option. And I don't know if you've noticed generational stuff, because you've now served at least 2 generations of different mindsets and cultures and all that kind of stuff. Is there anything that you've noticed in that way of how the culture of the nation, or at least the city, shows where kids want to put their energies?
I think part of it, and it's part of my mindset as well, is if you give me all of the options available and allow me to make my best choice, I think that's something that comes for kids. And prior to these kids taking this class, as I had said earlier, they knew their doctor where they saw him once a year or every other year or anything like that. But now they've heard from so many different other people going, there's a lot of options for me. And when Dr. Ramos comes in saying, I'm an emergency room doctor, I'm also, and then here's my path. I went back to law school and now I'm a lawyer. And the kids are like, oh, wow.
Yeah, that's a jaw dropper right there. That gets your attention.
Yeah, it's not like, I like to say that I like to listen to music, but I'm not going to be the next Eddie Van Halen. Yeah.
And speaking of that, you and I are working together to kind of collaborate to figure out a way through Ramos Law and what you're doing to create a similar situation for legal matters, for kids to come in and learn about what lawyers do and that kind of stuff. That I'm really excited about the project. The fact that you were kind enough to consider me as a partner to create this with you, it's been like a really, really big honor for me. But tell people about that.
Well, so I see this law class being very similar to the med class. We'll offer it hopefully in the spring. And what it would do is, again, create, you know how big law is. Law is probably just as big, if not bigger, than medicine. And again, kids, they might have watched a show with a lawyer in it and think that's all that happens. Well, it would be so neat to have kids realize there's so much more to law. They don't have to just be an attorney to work with law. They don't have to. There's a lot of great opportunities. And I'm looking forward to hearing all of the opportunities that law has as well. And Dr. Ramos says he has a few people that he has in mind that he can't wait to have come and speak with kids. So this, I think this class will be as big, if not bigger. And then who knows what could happen. I mean, I brought the medical class to Cherry Creek High School, but we offer it to 3 other high schools in our district with other people just like me who are running it. And it's fantastic. What's going to happen with law? I mean, I don't mind when people lean on me and say, hey, how did you do this? I look at it saying, we're doing what's best for kids and let's keep doing it. And not that not that between medicine and law, that's going to encompass 100% of the population, but it's going to get a certain amount of the population. You might have other kids that have found their little niche already that they want to go into. But I think, between medicine and law, there is so many opportunities for kids that they just didn't know. And when did they get to know it? Oh, maybe they were a junior in college and now they're changing their pathway because they realize this is what I want to do. And so their 4 years of college turns into 6 or 7 years because they changed their degree. I don't know about you, but boy, when I came out of high school, as I said, I wanted to be an orthodontist because he had a cool car.
Yes.
And I still ask the kids every day when I see them, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'll ask kids individually. So I don't know. It's not, but seriously. Why are you always asking? It's like, well, I haven't grown up yet. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And they're like, oh, you're old. I'm like, oh, well.
That may be true, but I'm still not growing up.
and then it's funny. They'll find out, like, you're 51? Yeah. Gosh, I would have thought and I'm thinking, this is loaded. Would have thought you were like 38 or 39. It's like, okay.
I love you.
You did. You're going to do well in my eyes. And
that's great. Great. When you're dealing with all these kids and you're looking at them both in the math classes that you teach, because again, you teach 9 through 12. So you're seeing these kids at different levels of maturity. Do you find that your ability to influence them as a teacher, do you notice that it's more profound early in the high school education or later? Or and it may be different for you because you may have, like if my kids in your class, you may have them all 4 years. I don't know. In that way, you build that over time. Any correlation you see as when kids are really impressionable as to the mentorship of a teacher?
So prior COVID, when kids would come from middle school to high school, it was, they were the big fish at their middle school, and now they come in going, where do I fit in? COVID goofed a lot of things up with all educators because you had kids that they lost out on a year and a half or more of being social with a large amount of people. We'll get them caught up. I'm not worried. I mean, people say, oh, these kids will never get caught up in life. We'll be fine. We'll make it work. We know how to, as teachers, as all teachers out there, we know how to make our curriculum work. What's most important for our kids? We're going to do it. Now, if that means that I have to go back a couple months into last year to bring up a concept, okay. That doesn't mean that they're missing out on life. They're going to do just fine. And I'm so motivated. I always tell the kids when they ask me, like, why do you present all these different things for kids? It's like, well, I'm preparing the future. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, you're the future. So I'm old. I'm already done my stuff, but I'm preparing you for the future because you're the next leaders of tomorrow. And honestly, that means the better I prepare you, the better my retirement. So it really all comes it's all about me. And they're like, it's not about you. And I'm like,
great. Oh, that is so good. These kids, I can feel the presence that you have in their lives, but also that they bring to you. They bring you energy. They bring you fulfillment. Like, it's just so obvious. What's your vision for the EPIC programs, whether it be on the medical side or as the law side? Do you have a vision? I know this is in several schools now. Is there something that you see this, or is it just kind of, hey, let's just let it grow organically and see where it goes?
Well, I think we were on a path to really get it open to all of the schools in Cherry Creek schools, and then when COVID hit, that kind of goofed things up. So I'd like to see it jump to other districts a lot more. I know that Denver Public Schools, Dr. Baker and I had worked with one of the Denver Public Schools, and we got it open at one of them with a teacher like me bringing people in. And they were, as far as I know, they're still continuing to do it. But I would like kids to realize, and would like teachers to realize, this is not a hard program to do. It's kind of hard as a teacher because a lot of times the teacher wants to be the center of attention. Well, I turn the reins over every morning with my medical class, and it will be the same with my law class, to someone else to teach kids. So that's kind of hard to do, but I've presented at the Career Tech Ed conference a couple years ago about the medical class, and I had a few schools from different areas reach out and, we want to do it, but it would kind of just fizzled away. But I'd like to see it grow into something bigger. And as well as once we get the law class going, I would love to see that grow bigger and bigger and offer the kids anywhere up and down the Front Range, anywhere in the state, the opportunity to take it. I guess I could get to a point with the med class or even the law class where we could create it as I could record those lessons and I could just put it out there for people. So somebody who's out on the Eastern Plains, say out in Hugo, Colorado, which it would be pretty hard to put either of these kind of classes together in Hugo because you don't have a lot of doctors.
Getting specialty types out there.
Yeah. So, be able to offer those kind of opportunities to kids, I think it would be fantastic. I guess there could be a point where it could be a live stream where any school USA could jump onto a live stream, and then all of a sudden they could have questions coming in where I could have somebody saying, hey, Becky from Kentucky wants to know. And
oh, that's a great idea. Look at you. See, this is what's so awesome. Like, you're using creativity and technology to meet the need. It's interesting to me. And as you were talking, it's something similar to when you mentioned that there's a lot of people that could be served on the medical and legal side in these kids to say, do I want to do this or do I not? In the same way, but different, as you have shop classes, you have mechanics classes, you have these kind of prep schools that are aside from the high schools. I know my kids both went to one of these programs where they would go to their high school for part of the day, and then they would go to one of these other schools, and they would get things that helped them decide what they wanted to do. And a lot of those programs were geared around trades and things of that nature. And so I think what you've done and the predecessors that helped you put this together, now what we're doing with the law thing is, while you're not getting an intensive on, let's say, auto mechanics or woodworking or home ec type stuff like interior design, while you're not doing that as a specialty, you're getting the chance to taste what would it be like a day in the life of an orthopedic surgeon, a trauma person, a nurse practitioner, chiropractor, acupuncturist, whatever. And by being able to ask those questions, it now then opens the door for curiosity to, like you say, if someone wanted to find out what does a chiropractor do, I could certainly, while I don't practice every day all day, I certainly have 100 chiropractors that I could send someone to. Same thing with the lawyer groups, I think what you've done, and I don't know if you've ever it didn't hit me till our conversation today, you've created that opportunity because there hasn't really been one for people in that age group to do that like they can into some of these other school programs where they're going 3 days a week. Now they're going 3 days a week into a health and now a legal program. I think it's so exciting.
And we do have, in Cherry Creek School District, we have the CCIC campus, which those are pathways. We have construction. We have a nursing program. And CCIC is going to dislike me because I can't label all their programs. But I know they have an aviation program where kids are learning how to work on actual planes and helicopters. Just trying to think some of those other programs there. But So I'll have students at our school. So they'll have me, be at my school for the first 3 periods of the day or the last 3 periods of the day because they're at the CCIC school, and that's down, where the Broncos practice. And, some of those kids, they come in saying, wow, we saw this. This was absolutely fantastic. And I think, wow, you can apply what you are doing in my classroom to realize, 2 3/8, if you're in the construction, 2 3/8 is going to mean something to you. That's a measurement. That's going to be a real thing in that kid's head. And I think that, those kind of opportunities for kids, not that I think every kid needs to go into one of those programs in the morning or afternoon, but it's nice that those opportunities are available. And I just love where education is starting to realize we are at the forefront. We are educating our future. Not every kid is bound for university A, B, or C. They might look at the community college system. They might look going in the military. They might look at, I'm going into this trade right after high school. I look at some of the guys. I had a plumber come over to a house, and he had to replace a couple gaskets. Wow. It was a mortgage payment after he left. I thought, boy, that what an unbelievable field to get into, especially as some of these young guys. And I realized, we're losing our plumbers and our electricians and our hands-on people. And now we're starting to turn that a little bit, saying, we have a need. We have to fill this void that is going to happen. And I love that we have that opportunity. I know that I had heard, and I don't know if they do it, but I heard from one of the teachers at CCIC, at any high school that has athletics, they have a day of signing. And the day of signing is if a kid is going to commit to go play at the next level their sport. I heard at CCIC that they were going to do a day of signing of, this person completed the construction. So that's now their pathway.
So cool.
So I think, recognizing those wonderful accomplishments of all kids, and not all kids are going to go to college, not all kids, but if a kid can find their passion, if they can find what I found, my passion is teaching. Doing what's best for kids is my passion. I don't work. And I know that Cherry Creek Schools might be listening to this at some point, but I really do work, but I don't feel like I work. I feel it's not stressful. It's enjoyable. It's offering the opportunities for kids and recognizing. Do we have time for one more story?
Please.
So my biggest success story that ever came out of the medical class, I think I had shared it with you. We'll call this student Jennifer. Okay. I had her many years ago. She did not have a really great home life. She had me for math for 3 or 4 years. So I'm not sure what she did wrong to have me for 3 or 4 years, but and I've had a handful of students all 4 years in high school in math, not because they're repeating the class. I just had the progression of classes for them. Well, we were going to go. I said to her, I want you to take my medical class. She goes, I don't want to be a doctor. I understand. I just want you to see the opportunities available. So then we were at the cadaver lab, and I asked her prior to the cadaver lab, I say, hey, can you meet me about 45 minutes early? Because I want to show you what this opportunity of being a phlebotomist might be about. And one of the community colleges had that. And I showed her. So she became a phlebotomist. And then she got the higher certifications to where she was in the emergency room and just different higher pays. She, about 3 years ago, finished her nursing degree. And she will say to me, anytime she sees me, that the medical class changed my pathway from working at Wendy's or McDonald's to now being a nurse.
Wow.
I mean,
that's like a chill giver right there. Because again, the program that you've set up and that you're tending to cares enough to give perspective, right? And you as a human being and as a teacher and an influencer have a chance to say, hey, I want you to check something out. Yeah, you don't have to buy all the way in, but just look at something to change their world. What about if someone is considering being a teacher? Do you have any advice for them? Because you've shown up in spades today for anyone. I think anyone listening or watching this would say, man, I would love for my kid to have been able to work with Mr. Stirrup or to be able to do that. If someone is considering being a teacher, is there any advice that you would have for them?
The best piece of advice that was given to me after my first year teaching by a physics teacher, he and I shared an office together. He said to me, he said, Chris, there's something you have to know about being a teacher. This is before I even walked into my first class to teach. This was during the week before. And I said, what's that? And he said, the kids are always the same age. You're the one getting older. And that just sunk in. It meant so much to me. You know, in my first couple of years teaching, it's like, 25, 26
you're a
years
baby
old.
too.
Yeah. But now at 51, it's like, yeah, these kids, these 50, I guess some of my freshmen could be 13, 14, all the way up to 18, 19 as seniors. They're always the same age. And so, I just kind of keep that little perspective in there. There's a movie that I always watch before I go back to school. And I always tell my other teacher colleagues, you got to watch this movie. And they're like, oh, I've seen it a ton of times. Doesn't matter. You got to watch it. The Breakfast Club.
No kidding. Why The Breakfast Club?
Because you're going to have the nerd. That's going to be in your classroom. You're going to have the troubled, rebellious teenager. You're going to have the jock. You're going to have the princess. And you're going to have kind of the goth kid. Mm-hmm. And that's all really what's going to take place in your classrooms. So you have, I think that movie is so powerful to realize, when you first introduce the movie, oh, these are kind of troubled kids. Well, it's not the kids that are troubled. It's actually the counselor who was there to run the Saturday school these guys were in. And it's like, guys, you got to keep with that true north. You got to stay even keel. You have to realize every one of these kids comes to your classroom. They have a different story. Each day is different. Each period, as I said earlier, is different. And it's just reading what's going on. If I had to say, wanted to teach these 5 lessons in a week, and I get all 5 lessons in one classroom done, and I only get 4 in the other because I recognized there was an opportunity that was bigger than something in math that needed to be addressed with kids or a student, I'll be a day behind in one class. It's not going to hurt me. Just you bend with the breeze.
So good.
I remember I thought this was funny. Being I grew up in Arizona, I didn't know what a snow day was. Moving here, you got snow days. And, some people like, oh, aren't you happy it's snow day? Well, I'm going to miss the kids, but yeah, it's a nice opportunity. I'm going to go out and shovel, and I try and shovel my neighbors' yards too, but you make sure they're taken care of. And I remember one of the teachers saying this many years back. She said, oh, there's 2 snow days in a row. How am I going to finish my curriculum? I'm like, are you the only one worried about that? Because I can guarantee that your 100+ kids that you have this year, they're like, snow day, yay.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. One more question for you.
Yes,
and
sir.
It doesn't have anything to do with teaching. You mentioned kind of the best piece of advice that you got from your physics cohort, talking about understanding the age of yourself versus your kids. Is there one piece of advice that you've learned or that you were given about life that you use as a pillar of what you do and how you do it, how you conduct yourself, that you would like to share with everyone?
My dad used to always tell me, son, there's no free lunch. But that doesn't mean there's not appetizers that can't come without expense. So I just look at, telling kids, this is your grade, but do you need a little guidance? Me trying to guide you a little bit on a question, me to guide you on a question rather than you leave the question blank is something huge. I actually took a class. The State Department of Education wants all the teachers for certification to take this English language learners class. And I took it and I absolutely loved it. And they had some great ideas of how to help the English language or the ESL learner. And I took this one piece of advice they did and I implemented this past year, and I'm going to continue for the rest of my career. So what I do if we have a word problem on a test, just imagine it. Do you speak any other languages?
I mildly speak Spanish.
Okay. So let's say I gave you a math question that was all in German. And you have a whole test. So what are you going to do with that one word problem that's all in German?
I got to skip it.
Okay. That's just like that English language learner kid. Okay. They're coming to me. They could go 2/3 x = 16 and they could solve it. They understand the foundation. Now I'm going to give you a word problem. And I know everyone always jokes about 2 trains leave Chicago going opposite directions.
At the same time.
I've yet to give that question ever in 26 years of teaching. But So what I realized, a part of this class had said, is when you have a word problem, put it up on the board. And so I'll get the kids started and I'll say, hey, there's 2 word problems on the test. And as you're going through the test, what I'll do is I'm going to pause you. And what we're going to do with this word problem is I'm going to read it out loud to you as you're looking at it either on the board or on your piece of paper. I'm then going to highlight the important things on this problem. Jim, every kid this year attempted every word problem.
Nice.
That wasn't what it was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I was lucky if I got half my kids at word problem, skipping it. And that was even for a kid who, in say Algebra 1, grammar and math, it's like, how are you going to mend these together? But by just putting it on the board and just highlighting, reading it out loud and highlighting. I'm not setting up the problem. I'm highlighting. And I kind of joke around with it saying, Billy went to the store. And then I might turn around to him saying, Billy going to the store, does that mean anything mathematically for this story? Or this math problem?
No.
Like, no. It's okay. Well, I'm going to highlight it in pink. Pink means I'm not going to worry about it. Whoosh, highlight the whole thing. He bought 3 candy bars and a bag of chips. The candy bars were the exact same price. And he spent $4.55. How much were each candy bars and the bag of chips? And then I'll go there and highlight the actual things that mean something. And I told the kids too, I said, guys, I'm showing you a skill that when you are taking an SAT or an ACT or whatever test, whatever class, I said, you're in your science class. They're going to give you word problems all the time. Go in there with some highlighters. I got hit. These kids are highlighting stuff. They're catching into it. They're buying into it going, I can do this problem. But just having them hear it read out loud and highlighted means they didn't all get it right mathematically, but they tried it. There's a thought process. I always tell the kids, if you leave something blank, it's really easy for me to say, well, that was a 5-point problem -5. Well, that -5 doesn't really say what that kid knows. But if I go and I highlight that word problem, it was a 5-point problem, I highlight it and I put some things down and there's some mathematical thought that I can see, there are points I can award. And I try and tell the kids, if you can get 3 out of the 5 points just because you've set it up appropriately, that's more points than you would have gotten if you left it blank.
Yeah.
And that should help you with a higher grade. So I'm excited to see, continue to do it. I'm working with we have PLC teams. We meet once a week with each class that we teach. And it's so fun to work and learn from other teachers who are teaching the same content. And there's times where it'll be like, hey, Chris, show me how you would teach this. Not because we're trying to criticize me, Chris, but some of the, it's like, well, I would teach this way to factor doing it this way. And it's like, oh, I can see where you're going with that. And we build upon it.
Right.
And then it's like, all right, hey, Bill, can you come up and show us how you would do this problem? Well, I would show it this way. Well, why are you going to show it that way? And there's sometimes where in no way, shape, or form do I teach it 100% the correct way. I'm learning every time. I'm going to change how I'm going to do it. I see why that happened. Someone had said a long time ago, and I know we've heard it before, if you continue to do the exact same thing over and over and over and expect different results, that's classified
insanity.
Yes, sir.
I'll tell you what, this has been an insanely good conversation. Chris, you have shared so much with us. And again, your passion comes through just so brightly. And I can't thank you enough for investing yourselves in our youth, because it does make a difference. They are our future leaders. They are who we're going to become, right? We're going to fall under their leadership as we grow older. So the fact that you've taken the time to donate your life to them, to your family, and now given that story to us means so much. So I look forward to what we're going to do together, continue to do together, not only in the med program, but on the law program. And I wish you continued success at Cherry Creek and with your students, and man, just best of luck to you moving forward.
I got to give a plug out though. I couldn't do all this without the wonderful leadership of my school district and of my school. Principal Silva does an outstanding job. All of his assistant principals and deans, so supportive of teachers, so supportive of kids. Cherry Creek School, same thing. Very supportive of teachers, staff, students. It's absolutely incredible. So you had asked before, what would I tell someone that's looking for the future, become a teacher? You find that type of school and school district that is supporting their staff and students and doing what's best for kids. And again, Principal Silva, outstanding individual to work for, and Marcus McDavid, one of the assistant principals, Jessica Robinson. And if I'm going to forget some of them because we have so many of them, but I apologize to them if I didn't say their name. Kevin Eulig, absolutely outstanding individual. He's the hardest job at the school because he has to deal with the really bad stuff that takes place, and he does a great job. But it all comes from the leadership, and the leadership comes from above, from our superintendent all the way down. And I just absolutely I'm so happy to be where I'm at. I love it.
It's a good day. It's a good day. Well, continued success to you. Continued success, Cherry Creek. Please keep Cherry Creek giving an example for how education can and should be done. And until next time, if you're out there, please watch this, share it. And until we see each other again, keep making a difference.